And here we are at the top of the steps. And we are just coming from the place where the New York Botanical Garden was quite visible. And through the trees, we saw quite a few things. We saw, as we looked to our east, a fairly imposing building among a number of red brick buildings. However, the biggest one is 80 Towers. And 80 Towers is significant because there, people of all ethnicities live. However, quite a few African Americans and Afro Caribbeans live there and are largely private business owners and civil servants. And they banded together over quite a protracted period of time to combat the way Bronx Park became a kind of illegal zone, unfortunately, for all kinds of activity, which cannot be mentioned during this presentation. However, was totally out of control during the crack epidemic. And so, through their activism, working together with the community board and local politicians and the Parks Department, they were able to assemble several $1,000s to renovate Rosewood Playground, which is now still a very beautiful playground, which is no longer host to all kinds of illegal activity and is a safe place for children to play. In the other direction, we saw the Pfizer plant laboratory, which was built by Sister Gonzalez. She is a Latina architect who is the designer for this laboratory, which is also an essential research facility for Columbia University's programs here at the New York Botanical Garden. And we'll see still images of this beautiful building that was opened between 2005 and 2006 right on the Bronx River. As we stand up here, we also want to make acknowledgement that we are standing within the former estate of Isaac Varian, who owned 500 acres of land, according to Lloyd Alton's book on the subject, The Valentine Varian House, Legacy of the American Revolution, which is available for purchase through the Bronx County Historical Society online and at their bookshop within the Valentine Varian House on Bainbridge Avenue. So slavery, let's talk about slavery in the Bronx. Understanding that the Bronx as a name for a place only comes about in the late 1800s. However, at this point, it's still Lower Westchester. So this Bronx, we see in one of the still images beautifully shot by Trent Love, is depicted in a painting in a book that's being held up by one of the tour goers. This painting is from 1861 by Sanford Gifford, who is a major Hudson River School painter. His paintings are in the permanent collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the National Academy, both on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. So this picture shows you how rural the Bronx was, because again, the Bronx only urbanizes when mass transit makes that possible. So 1861 is only one generation after the Harlem and New York Railroad comes through, but it's before the Third Avenue elevated line comes in the late 1800s. So it's still fairly rural. And we are now, at the time of this taping and at the time of the tour, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the American Civil War, which is going to be explored in an exhibition within that Valentine Varian House that you're seeing images of, which is operated by the Bronx County Historical Society. So slavery existed in Lower Westchester, the pre-Bronx. From the mid-1600s, the first African Americans were brought to the Bronx as slaves from Barbados by the Morris family, who were using slave labor on their sugar plantations there, and were soon to acquire land in Lower Westchester, which became quite extensive. We're talking about several hundred acres, much larger than Bronx Park, mostly fronting on the Harlem River. However, as the property expanded and as they had children and intermarried, they and their progeny had land right up onto the Bronx River. And there are quite a few data points that we want to go through to understand slavery in the Bronx. And the first is that slavery was totally legal up here as late as 1841. So slavery for New York State residents, okay, that is, if you were a Caucasian who owned a slave, if you uh, you could only do so through 1827. However, if you were an out-of-stater who was in New York State temporarily, it was actually legal to bring enslaved people into New York State and work seasonally through 1841, which means slavery was legal in the Bronx all the way up to only one generation before we fought the American Revolution, the American Civil War. Can you dig that? I think that's really deep. Some other facts that are worth knowing are these. 1691, Lewis Morris, part of that Morris family from Barbados, held 60 slaves, according to the Slavery in New York show at the Historical Society of New York, right across from the American Museum of Natural History, which I'm sure everybody listening to this has been to. So that's right. If you're interested in learning more about slavery in the Bronx, there are sources. The catalog from that show that was held around 2005 is still widely published and is easily available at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture's bookshop, and also at the Historical Society itself on Central Park, but also online quite easily. Some other facts to know. African Americans constituted about 15% of pre-Bronx residents and over 80% of Morrisania residents in the early 1800s, according to census tracts. What led to the demise of the Bronx African American community, and the reason why people don't think of us being here continuously, is that Irish displaced us as they came in through the potato famine in the early 1800s. They were willing to work for less money than we were willing to work for, and therefore a lot of landowners started dismissing free African American laborers, because slavery ended in 1827, for Irish American laborers. And with that, we're going to make our way up 204th Street, which becomes Bainbridge Avenue, which leads us into Norwood, and we're going to stop at Mind Builders.